Nearly $1 billion. Attackers reached out from Bangladesh Bank into the Federal Reserve Bank of New York and tried to move the money through SWIFT. That should not happen. So how do you get that deep inside the global banking system and still leave behind a case that never really closes? Investigators pulled the clock back. The transfers had not begun the story. By the time money started moving, the intruders were likely already inside Bangladesh Bank's systems, sitting there for months, maybe close to a year, without forcing anyone to look up. Nothing flashed. That raised a worse question. How had they stayed invisible for that long? They watched first. Staff behavior. SWIFT routines. The ordinary rhythm of who clicked what, when files appeared, how credentials were used across the day. Then they took what counted. Legitimate access. Real credentials. The kind that makes a false move look normal for one more hour. But malware did not answer everything. Many investigators started circling a harder possibility. Insider assistance, or at least insider knowledge. The kind that would explain why the attack moved through the bank's habits without much friction. Proof never arrived. The suspicion stayed. Inside the SWIFT environment, the attack changed shape. The malware did not just enter. It manipulated records, interfered with monitoring, hid the fraudulent transfers inside the bank's own systems, and disabled the printers that should have started screaming on paper. No printouts came. And without those pages, the room stayed quiet longer than it should have. By the time Bangladesh Bank employees started finding the damage, the money was already in motion. Printers were broken, logs were missing, records inside the bank had been manipulated, so the first people looking at the mess were staring at a system built to mislead them. They were late. Not by much, but enough. At the New York Fed, the fraud caught on something tiny. One transfer named Shalika Foundation. Another carried the word Fandation, and investigators believed that misspelling helped expose the requests before almost the full $1 billion disappeared. One wrong letter. That was the sound of the plan slipping. Fed officials moved fast. They froze most of the outgoing transfer requests before they could clear, cutting off the larger escape while the orders were still trying to pass through. Most of it stopped. Not all of it. The money map was wider than one route. Requests pointed toward the Philippines, Sri Lanka, and other destinations across Asia, as if the theft had been designed to scatter itself before anyone could hold the full shape in one view. Several doors opened. Only one mattered. About $81 million reached the Philippines. The Sri Lanka transfer drew scrutiny and was recovered. That split the story in two. One branch caught in time, the other already moving through a place where the trail would start to thin. The real loss had a destination now, and someone was waiting there. In Manila, the trail narrowed to the RCBC Jupiter Street branch. That was where the stolen funds entered specific accounts, no longer just numbers flying between institutions, but money landing in a real branch, under real controls, with real signatures somewhere in the chain. The path had an address. So who owned those accounts? The accounts were old enough to look settled. Investigators later concluded many had been opened months earlier under fake identities, then left with little or no activity until millions suddenly arrived through the RCBC Jupiter Street branch. Dormant, then full. That did not look improvised. Paperwork started naming the masks. Investigators publicly identified the shell account holders used in the scheme, pushing the fraud out of abstraction and into documents that could be pointed at, copied, and read aloud. Names appeared. Whether they led to organizers or fronts was still another matter. Then Maya Santos de Guido, former manager of the RCBC Jupiter Street branch, moved to the center. Authorities accused her of helping process suspicious withdrawals and pushing the stolen money onward once it reached the branch. She denied being part of the conspiracy, but the money had already passed through her lane. That changed the pressure. Now the case had a face, and still no clean answer. But Maya Santos Teguido did not stay quiet. She pushed back in public, saying the suspicious withdrawals were only one slice of it, and that blame was settling on her while a much larger network stayed out of reach. More powerful figures. If she was right, the branch was never the whole story. In Bangladesh, the loss stopped feeling technical. Money was gone from a central bank reserve account. Tens of millions. Large portions never came back, and what disappeared on screens now sat as a public wound that could not be balanced away. The number held. Could anyone bring back a meaningful share of $81 million? Across Manila, the trail entered Philippine casinos and junket operations. Once the stolen funds crossed into that world, they moved through a place seen at the time as ideal for washing large sums, far looser than the banking system they had just escaped. The doors stayed open. Following the money did not get easier there. Inside that pipeline, cash became chips. Chips mixed with casino action. They moved through gamblers, passed into brokers, and slipped onward through foreign exchange channels, each handoff making the original source harder to hold on to. Fast in, fast out. Who was coordinating that sequence? From the casino floor, the path stretched again. Significant portions were allegedly routed toward Hong Kong and other overseas destinations, pushing the money farther from the first transfer orders and farther from any simple recovery. The map widened. The trail did not. Kim Wong, the junket operator connected to the laundering stage, stepped before Philippine authorities. He returned part of the money and said he had not helped plan the original theft, a statement that sounded useful on paper while leaving the larger machinery around him only partly lit. Some money came back. The design of the crime did not. Another channel surfaced. Philram Service Corporation came under investigation, and attention moved to its executives, opening one more route through which the same stolen funds may have been pushed after leaving the casinos and junket world. Not one path, more than one. Hearings widened the cast. William Goh appeared in the record. Jason Goh did too. Michael Bautista, Ismael Reyes. Around them sat brokers, junket operators, intermediaries, and other facilitators believed to have helped move the funds. The network started to look crowded. Exposed was another question. Then the trail hit the casino sector and seemed to give way. Investigators used a colder phrase for what happened there: a black hole. The place where much of the money disappeared from view, even as pieces were said to keep moving toward overseas destinations. That was the answer. And it was barely an answer at all. Back in Bangladesh, the bank's own defenses came under harder light. Outdated hardware, weak segmentation, poor protections around the SWIFT infrastructure. The attack no longer looked like a clean strike against a hardened wall, but a break through systems that had been left too open for too long. The weakness was physical. Machines, network lanes, blind spots. Cybersecurity analysts kept pulling at the code. BAE Systems and Symantec compared malware and earlier operations, and the technical similarities pulled suspicion toward the Lazarus Group, the cyber organization most commonly linked to the attack and believed by intelligence agencies and cybersecurity firms to operate on behalf of North Korea. A name emerged. The people behind keyboards did not. Years passed. Then Maya Santos Teguido was convicted on multiple money laundering charges and sentenced. One of the few moments in the entire case where the system produced something final instead of another hearing, another claim, another missing link. A verdict landed. It still did not explain the whole operation. After 2016, the reaction spread far beyond one bank. SWIFT, financial institutions, and regulators tightened cybersecurity rules, moving to harden the same international plumbing that had nearly carried off almost the full $1 billion before anyone could stop it. The system changed. The mystery stayed where it was. Nearly $1 billion had been targeted. By the end, much of the money was still missing, Many hackers remained unknown, and the laundering network was never fully exposed, leaving the case with one conviction, scattered recoveries, and a central theft that still feels larger than the answers attached to it. That is what lingers. Not the attempt, the gap.